Chapter 4. We can't talk long on an open line, encryption or no, make it fast. Hearing a friendly voice after the night I'd had swelled my heart. I was on the road with the marshals. Rossi's caught up to me, shot up my protection detail. I'm knee-deep in it. The voice on the other end replied, Shit, that's no good. I'll bet those hoods had planned a nice dinner for you. Glad you made it out alive. I'm sure they'd have dragged out the main course, then robbed me of dessert. But they're the entree for whatever wanders by or flies overhead up there now. Bloody? Very. Silence on the line. Any survivors? Your detail? All dead. Might make it above the fold in tomorrow's Times. Which doesn't do you any favors. Jesus, dude. You should have gone into private security. I barked unexpected laughter. I'd just been thinking that. I don't doubt it. So, what's the plan? I uttered a shorter, bitter chuckle. I was hoping you'd have ideas. Depends on your end game. You planning to go back and testify for the feds after the Rossis got this close? A snort escaped before I could stop it. Somehow I doubt you'd have asked if you didn't already know the answer. I've had it up to here. I need to disappear. Don't care where. I hear Canada is nice. I could do Mexico, New Zealand, if I can get there. Like you'd make it across a border. They'll have your face splashed on every government database trying to keep you out of mob hands. Anywhere I can lay low until we come up with something? This heat isn't going to pass, my friend. His tone was almost jovial over the predicament, but I knew better than to mistake it for indifference. Dead agents, dead suspects, and a missing snitch. I was a little more than some snitch. Fine. Private contractor with neighborhood connections. Who outside the U.S. Marshals and the organized crime unit at the Bureau is going to make that distinction? You're a means to an end. They want that end. So what? I resign myself to torture or continue to scurry place to place like a fucking cockroach while they try to stomp on me? If those shits wanted their happy ending, they should have taken what I had, dragged Rossi into court, then put him away while they worked out the rest. Instead, they got what I gave them, turned me over to the marshals, then washed their hands until a court date that never came. This isn't on me, and escaping by the skin of my teeth is getting old pretty fast. I heaved out a sigh and rubbed my temples with the thumb and forefinger of my free hand. Whatever happened to the mob not shooting at law enforcement? The best trick the mob ever played was convincing society they didn't exist in the post-technology world. You were about to slap them above the same fold we were talking about a minute ago. The old rules are out the window. Now focus. Can you get me an ID or not? You saved my ass more times than I can count. I'll help. But an ID isn't going to do it. It's your face, man. Your palm and fingerprints. I got stopped all the time by TSA, so this wasn't really a surprise. Maybe I can come up with a better way. I'll get in touch with Brenner. Brenner, our unit's nerd commander. Who knew how many terrorists he'd monitored to keep me alive? Like when I'd infiltrated a group in Bosnia planning a terror attack on a religious tourist site. I had dark enough features to pass for Middle Eastern, so Brenner tried to change my call sign to Prince of Persia. Dick. He was a real whiz. Could have done anything he wanted. No matter how many times he explained the tech in the military was top-notch, we couldn't understand his choice to join, and we were patriots. I almost couldn't believe I hadn't thought of him right away. I've never been so glad to know you're still in touch with our nerd king. I've tried to keep my distance, so the family doesn't track people down for leverage. Can he hack facial recognition now? Doubtful, but you know how creative he gets. You'll have to trust me. For now, remember that place we met for lunch after you left the service? Meet me in the little dump across the street. Green door. Oh, and Tanner, be subtle. Why there? No street cams. Line went dead. We'd been talking way too long, but I had so much more to ask. Oh well, curiosity. Cats. I cranked the truck, held the wheel steady until the tires caught, then manhandled it onto the main road. Chapter 5. Once I'd wiped it down for Prince, I ditched the truck outside of town in a bar parking lot. People got tanked and ride-shared all the time, and the place was hopping despite the snow pelting down like La Niña held a grudge. But trudging along the frosty verge in a suit, made for a man who was wider than he was tall, topped by a ski-bum winter coat, left me feeling conspicuous. I caught myself glancing from the corner of my eyes like a stoner scoping for cops. Then I plucked at the suit as if I could improve the fit. The city barely left a footprint at the base of the mountain, and I shouldn't have worried so much about being out of place. The bar had probably been the prevalent night spot because the further I trudged from it, the quieter my surroundings became. But the silence grated on my nerves. Something about being on the run from the law and the worst kind of criminals did that. After what seemed hours, I reached the place we'd met and spotted the green door across the street. The only door across the street. A little cafe. It shouldn't have been open this time of night, or morning as it were. But the door gave freely, and the little bells jingled overhead. Only the dim light behind the counter was on, and I squinted in the darkness for signs of life. Then a shadow moved and someone rushed me. My heart invented a new tempo. My throat swelled. When my arms shot up to parry any incoming blows, a voice boomed, "My man!" Jack. My lungs deflated as a chill of relief washed down my spine. He swooped over, throwing out his arms. I scanned over his shoulder to spy the seat he'd occupied next to a giant fern in the corner, but my haunches didn't drop until we'd embraced and clapped each other's backs. He held me at arm's length so he could scan my getup. "You stop at a thrift shop on the way?" "Fuck you. Where's your ride?" Last I'd known, Jack piloted a sweet vehicle from the Wayback Machine. Sleek, gleaming metallic black, eye magnet. All told, I hoped he hadn't brought it. "Got a rental, paid cash, bribed the guy to keep it under the table so none of your friends can track it, just in case." I wondered which friends he referenced, then figured both kinds. Jack shrugged like he'd read my mind. "Been scanning channels online. Doesn't seem like anyone reported your little incident yet, but we'll want to keep moving." I slid my shoulder out of my coat as I considered the situation. We wouldn't have arrived at the next stop for a few more hours. Not much traffic up there, but someone always ventures by. When they do, believe me, they'll stop. I left bodies. Jack shook his head and snatched the coat before I could slip it off the second arm. "Keep it on. We're heading out. Made a few calls on the way, and I think we have a place you can lay low. We'll even keep you entertained until Nerdboy comes up with a plan." "So, spill." "Nah, you're going to have to wait. I want to show you. Come on." Jack flashed one of his mischievous grins, and my tension ratcheted up again. Back out into the snow we went. I shouldn't have grumbled so much, but I did, all the way down the street to the alley where Jack had stashed the 4.4 he rented. We climbed in, then headed out on another leg of what was becoming a zigzagging trip. Jack handled the snow like a pro, even in the rented clunker. There'd been a time when I was a kid when rental places maintained a certain standard, but in the years since most people moved online to work and for social interactions, bars in mountain towns notwithstanding, they were one of many industries that lowered expectations. Simple supply and demand, and maybe the decline of society and infrastructure. But why worry about the little things? Who needs bridges so few drive on? To think a video game started all that. But we still had a place for armed conflict, and Jack and I made a living at it. Bosnia was a frosty hell in the winter months, and Jack had ample practice piloting heavy machinery there. He was the best driver I knew in the military. Anyone who could command a tricked-out beast of a Hummer and who possessed a sixth sense about landmines and IEDs could pilot me around any time. Snow was nothing. What could Jack have concocted for me so fast, and why was it a secret? Not that I didn't trust him. He was my oldest friend. But these were crazy days, and somehow the Rossi family kept sniffing out my trail. I shot Jack a look. He was the same as ever, that manic smile dancing in his eyes as he made me wait to find out just what he had in mind. Guy always was a bit squirrely. Chapter 6. Lurid neon lit up the streets in the shady part of town where you could get handhelds, hacks for nearly anything, drugs, girls, boys, whatever you wanted if you had the cash. Probably could rent a llama for all I knew. It was Bianchi territory, the enemy of the Rossi family. Sweet place for those with fingers in all the pies. Don Bianchi was plugged in so high they did business right in the open. Probably owned most of what was sliding by outside the windows just now. Where the Jaworskis and their partners dabbled in virtual reality profiteering, the Bianchis dealt mostly in real-world shit, old school as it got. It also meant they watched their streets. Get connected like that, you maintain power. The Bianchis had sat atop the heap a long fucking time because they kept a close eye on their interests. One didn't just roll through looking to do a side hustle unless they wanted stitches. Or worse. Being there made me sweat. I angled the dash vent away from me and cracked the window. Jack glanced at me. I know, but you've got to trust the plan. No one knows you're here. It's a perfect place to stash you for a bit. Built-in protection from the Rossies. He had a point. There was no love lost between the families. The only reason they didn't get bloody anymore was mutual respect. They stayed away from each other. Street wars drew law enforcement. But even though I'd entered as a pseudo-private contractor with connections to a neighborhood the Bureau valued, I practically was law enforcement where the Jaworskis were concerned. And if the Rossies learned I was on their turf, their dislike for their rival would be the last thing on their minds. I would be first. I shook my head. I'm dead if they find out. That's when the shot rang out. Chapter 7. A geyser of hot blood spurted from the wound where my collarbone met my shoulder. Son of a bitch! I clapped my hand over the injury only to regret it a millisecond later. The nerves protested with a flurry of electric waves radiating from the source of penetration, down my arm and across my torso. Shit! I'm hit! The tires slid on the frosty surface as Jack whipped the wheel to one side, then gunned it. He threw a look over his shoulder out the back passenger's side window. His voice came in a practiced calm that left me wanting to strangle someone. Got him. Standing in a breezeway, on foot. No way he'll catch us. His head whipped toward me as if the gunshot wound was the secondary matter. How bad? I wrenched away one edge of my collar, then twisted my head at an angle it wasn't meant to go. The flesh around my collarbone protested in a flurry of electric shivers, but I spied two holes. In and out, my words emitted in grunts. Bloody but survivable. He nodded. Shit. Wonder how they found us. Eyes. I winced against the pain brought on by the single word. On the streets. Guess your outfit was conspicuous. The bastard chuckled. A new wave of pain radiated down my arm, and nausea bloomed in my gut. When I tried to swallow, the muscles in my throat seized. I coughed incoherent syllables. Jack shook his head and clutched my uninjured shoulder. Keep pressure on it. He punched a button on the touchscreen, leaving me to wonder why he'd bothered pairing his phone with the rental. The shit I thought about at the craziest times. A voice flowed through the speakers, as if the recipient of the call sat on the dash. Yo, you got our boy? Shut up, Jack ordered. They found him. He's hit. He tapped the touchscreen. 5 blocks out. Hold the door for us. We'll be coming in hot. Jack, I've got no supplies here. You've got to get him to a dock or something. I shook my head with fury. Jack nodded understanding. Bullshit, Brenner. It's not that bad. We can patch him up, but he's gonna need to recoup. How'd they track him? I think the Bianchis got a call from the Rossies. No other way I can think of. We underestimated their mutual interests. My back warmed as a stream of blood soaked into the seat behind me. Brenner sighed so static burst through the speakers. Makes sense. Common courtesy. I can almost hear them now. Hey, you got a problem coming your way. That means feds will follow. Might want to handle it and make it disappear before they arrive. If my life force hadn't been draining from me like Mount St. Helens with an attitude, I might have taken exception to the way they contemplated the scenarios, but I was too busy trying to keep vital fluids in my body. Brenner's voice came clearer. Dude, I've got it. Doors open. We're gonna have to burn the place later. But you might as well bring him. Might be his only chance at evasion. I've got a pod ready. Realization dawned in Jack's eyes. Dude, you're a genius. Think it'll work? He won't feel a thing while we work if he's logged in. Get him here. What? I spat more blood. What work? My periphery flashed black, then little white dots danced across my field of vision. I blacked out. The world came into harsh focus when my cheek exploded with pain. Need you awake, dude? Brenner pushed up the BC, birth control, glasses he hadn't shed after his military stint, and nodded. I sat in an enclosed space with a hydraulic door suited for a spacecraft. The nerd leaned in. I sniffed strawberry Twizzlers. Your heart rate is shit. Breathe. Listen. I nodded, noticing the cold numbness across my entire upper body. Brenner might have read it in my expression, but didn't seem to care. You want to get these assholes? Hit them where it hurts? Maybe even get them to back off when they see what kind of damage you can do? With the split flesh dictating my animus toward the bastards who'd helped put it there, I nodded with no small amount of enthusiasm. And didn't you tell me they operate in Mafioso online? I nodded again. He returned it. It's brilliant. The starting city is surrounded by nothing but an eternal forest, with a level-restricted harbor. It's filled with fantasy races who run organized crime rackets. You should feel right at home. I eyed Jack over Brenner's shoulder. He raised his chin but said nothing. It's diverse, and plenty of NPCs there aren't involved with crime. Same for players who log in to do crafting and build things. They even sweep up virtual real estate and sell it for real-world money. This wasn't news. Even though I hadn't penetrated the family deeply enough to know the ins and outs of their virtual reality connections to crime, they talked like it was Fort Knox in the old days. And the words Mafioso Online, or MO for short, had reached my ears more than once. When the world migrated into virtual environments to work, play, and feed their lurid fantasies, the crime rate dropped like mad. But it also created the opportunity for organized crime to rise from the ashes when law enforcement budgets were cut, and companies in the metaverse presented a place for them to make loads of cash. Jack mirrored Brenner's motion. It's genius, Tanner. They won't suspect you're there. Infinity won't cooperate with the feds either. Bad for business. They've kicked the government's ass in court from the beginning, so now's no different. Hell, Mafioso is too obvious. You'd be crazy to show up in a game like that. And you already get how these things work, the organizations. You'll have an advantage. I know you aren't a big fan of these games, but if you can get in there, find out how they move money, etc., you could send the kind of message that would get them to leave you be. Collect information the FBI could use to put them away, but only to show the mob you have the goods. Meanwhile, Brenner and I will work on how to keep the feds off your trail. I finally pushed the pain down enough to respond. And how am I supposed to operate with a hole in my shoulder in the outside world? Dude, the tech blocks off your outside experiences. That's how people get high in the games without harmful effects to their physical bodies. But it won't stop the bleeding either. I'll get what we need for that. Brenner clasped my unwounded arm. We'll patch you up, even run an IV. Jack leaned in. Maybe even call in some protection. Guys I'd trust with my life, I protested. We're only minutes from where they shot me. They're going to track us down. Brenner released my arm. Leave that to us. When have we ever left your ass hung out to dry? They hadn't, despite some crazy military engagements. I trusted those two with my life too many times to count. Why should then have been any different? Brenner flung his hand toward the red blooming through the makeshift compress. It'll be easier on both of us if you aren't writhing in pain while Jack and I patch you up. The mitigation will do that for us. No morphine needed. Jack leaned around Brenner and squatted to clutch my arm. He rattled off his words, careful to pronounce every syllable. Listen, you won't have a player's manual for the first while. It's how Infinity works their games. You have to figure it out for yourself. Immerse yourself. Find a mentor NPC. I wasn't sure I was following it all in real time. Maybe I was blacking out again. Brenner cut in. The people who play these hardcore games are ruthless pricks, so avoid other players until you have your shit together. Jack leaned in from the other side to keep pressure on the compress, and claustrophobia set in. In-game, Brenner stuck gloves over my hands as he talked. It's one big fight for territory. PvP is policed by the system. Families pay off the cops. You know how it works. Just like here. Players will attack you just to be dicks. That thing you game freaks call spanking? Brenner's reply came so fast I had a hard time absorbing the meanings of his words. Close. It's called ganking. So keep to yourself until you're stronger. The NPCs are better allies than the players, at least until you know what's up. No one's going to kill a level 1. The AI provides penalties for shit like that. Bullying. He raised a hand to stave off my obvious response. Yeah, I see the irony. Spare me. The authorities will hunt down known killers who come to the wrong part of town. Trust me, they're good at it. Some are on the take, some aren't, but you won't know who is who until you get acclimated and do a little recon. And if I know anything about you, it's that you majored in recon in the service. It's what got you into this mess with the feds. Jack squeezed my arm, but the sensation was ghostly, distant. My periphery darkened. Don't sweat it. Find work. Make a few bucks. Find one of the mentor NPCs. Jack caught my eye and held my gaze. Pain will stop as soon as we log you in. If any shit goes down out here, we'll pull and move you. You ready? I wasn't.